Hello, my name is Susie Circumer. I am President and CEO of South Arts. And I am so pleased to welcome you to this webinar today that we are hosting with the National Endowment for the Arts so that you can hear directly from the National Endowment for the Arts staff about how they will be allocating their grant funds that they administer directly to arts organizations throughout this country. So of course, we want the South to know in depth how to apply, and hopefully many of you will be successful applicants. So today, there are many people on this webinar that are people that we have had an involvement with before, but there's also some new people, and we're very pleased to welcome in particular the new people, as well as we have some people from outside the region. So I'll talk just a second about South Arts. South Arts is one of 6 regional nonprofit organizations in the country. The region we serve is a 9-state area, starting at North Carolina, going south to Florida, west to Louisiana, and Tennessee and Kentucky. We provide services, programs, and grants to these 9 states. And we focus on artists, communities, arts organizations, and leaders, arts leaders in the South to fulfill our mission of advancing Southern vitality through the arts. And today, we are pleased to have a video message from Senator Ossoff. Senator Ossoff was elected from the state of Georgia last fall. So he started his time in Congress in January. And we are very pleased that he took the time to do a video message for us today. I know Darren Owens, Special Projects Coordinator for Senator Ossoff's office, was expected to join us today. I'm not sure whether he has joined us or not. Darren, are you there?
Yes, how are y'all?
Oh, hi, Darren. Good to see you.
Yes.
So this is Darren Owens, and we're so pleased that you were able to take the time today to introduce this video message from the Senator.
Yes, well, I think we can let the video play. I think the Senator's gonna be a lot better at welcoming all you folks on, and then I can definitely follow up about getting connected with our office.
Good afternoon. Hello, South Arts Conference and National Endowment for the Arts. This is Senator John Ossoff. It is such a pleasure to address you today. Thank you for having me. I first want to thank Susie Circumer, President of South Arts, and the whole team at the National Endowment for the Arts for your vital work cultivating arts and culture in the American South, in the state of Georgia, across our country, and indeed around the world. Thank you for all that you do to promote arts and culture, these vital aspects of our life as a country. More important than ever as we recover from COVID-19, after we've been unable to convene and come together in so many ways. Your work helps lift our national spirits and define our national identity, unite us as a people, and set an example about what America stands for in the world. Deeply grateful and happy to be a partner. So pleased that we secured through the American Rescue Plan $135 million for the NEA, 40% of which goes directly to regional arts organizations like South Arts. I want to also commend your commitment to diversity, to being a champion for the arts in our state and across the country, and all of your amazing programs for kids and programs in schools. Thank you so much for what you do. I look forward to working with you and continuing to serve you. Take care.
Yes, I think following up with that, as the Senator said, our office is here to support and work with folks at the National Endowment of the Arts, at South Arts, and all of you who are on here in Georgia. We love our constituents. I think one of the messages we hear most from the Senator is how can we serve folks best? And so at the heart of that, and I think in the spirit of what this workshop is all about, is serving folks as best as we can in the community, especially coming out of this pandemic. So please feel free to reach out to myself directly. I'm the Special Projects Coordinator with our office. It's a fancy title for a not so fancy person, I promise. But I have the pleasure of working to coordinate the federal funding and grant opportunities that our office helps to assess throughout the state. Working with folks like South Arts and Susie and Ben and Ivan and all the team there at the NEA and South Arts to ensure that programs across our state are funded, and that we connect folks with grant opportunities and federal funding opportunities that are out there. Also work very closely with our legislative team. And as the senator said, we were able to secure $135 million from the American Rescue Plan to fund art programs across the country. And so I'm working closely with our legislative team that as I'm working with folks and are like, hey, I have this program that doesn't necessarily fit this current funding opportunity, but I think it should be funded, working with them to ensure that as we talk through appropriations and upcoming legislation like the infrastructure bill and just all that the administration and Congress is working to pass, that we can include the vital resources necessary to ensure that folks are able to pursue the opportunities that bring us together, as the senator said. And so I have been over the last few weeks, I've been working with Ben and Ivan, have been more than excited that things are opening back up, so I can start visiting folks in real life and not behind the screen. And so for the folks that are on the call or on the Zoom here, definitely feel free to reach out to our office. If you have an art program that you're like, hey, I want the senator to come and see what we're doing here in Georgia, definitely feel free to reach out to me. I'll include my contact information there in the chat box, but feel free to shoot me an email or visit our website and call our office. But thank you y'all so much for what you guys are doing here. Thank you for the time. Hope I didn't take up too much, and definitely don't hesitate to reach out.
Thank you so much, Darren, and thank you. Please send our thank you to the senator for taking the time today to address us. So really pleased and thank you very much. So as the senator said, there is, and as Darren said, there is $135 million out of the American Rescue Plan that was allocated to the National Endowment for the Arts. Of that $135 million, 40% of that is allocated directly from the National Endowment for the Arts to the 6 regionals and the 56 state arts agencies and territories. So we are very pleased to be administering funds through South Arts. And so with that, we're going to take a couple of minutes for our Vice President of Programs at South Arts to briefly talk about how we will use our money. Joy?
Hello, thank you so much, Susie. And again, we so appreciate the Senator's welcome. So in addition to what you are about to hear today from the NEA, South Arts will be partnering with our 9 states in this region to supplement the state's grants awards. We'll be doing this using an equity and diversity lens, and we're so proud to be able to be a partner with the endowment as well as with our 9 states. South Arts will also run its own grant programs that support putting creative workers to work, increasing arts accessibility for people with disabilities. And we also want to ensure that arts advocacy is supported across our 9-state South Arts region. Now, details are coming soon, so be sure to subscribe to our newsletter and visit our website, www.southarts.org. Now, I'd like to introduce you to our friends from the National Endowment for the Arts. Ben Kessler is Director of Congressional Affairs. Andy Mathis is our State and Regional Specialist. Anya Nikiforake is our Music Specialist. Courtney Spearman is Design Specialist. And Eleanor Billing is the Rescue Plan Specialist focusing on the ARP funds. So I'd like to hand this over to our guests and thank you again for being with us. It's all yours. Have a great webinar.
Thank you so much for that warm introduction, Joy, to Darren and Senator Ossoff. Thank you for jumping in with all the energy and heart that you have. I think we're all new to this line of work. I started just a couple days after Inauguration Day, and we couldn't ask for better partners than you, Darren, and the Senator, and know that everyone in the southeast part of the country, you could not be more well served than you are with South Arts, with Susie's leadership, with Joy and Ivan. They are just the most wonderful partners, and we're so grateful to be working with them every step of the way and making sure this money and really the money that we continue to get out through our regular grant making program makes it into your region. If we could just go to the next slide, please, Ivan. Great, thanks so much. So the goal for us today is not only to provide a deep dive into the upcoming American Rescue Plan funding that Darren and the Senator and Susie mentioned, but we really want to demystify the National Endowment for the Arts in our application process. We want you to leave this meeting knowing that an NEA grant is within your reach and that you have the technical assistance tools you need. We want to emphasize that this is really the beginning of a conversation. We've all had that moment, whether it's in school, at work, where we have the question that comes to our mind exactly when the meeting is over and we go home and we're maybe lying in bed and we said, if I only asked that one question, everything would be better in my life if I just had the answer to that one question. And we're here to tell you, you have many opportunities to ask those questions. First, I'll share in the chat right now a link to a ongoing live Q&A session. So this will be Zoom sessions where a couple of our colleagues will be present. It will look just like we're in today. I see that I've just sent it to, let me send it to the whole group. My apologies. There we go. So that's a link to live Q&A, what we're calling open office hours. Drop by with your questions, listen in. No question too small. Chances are if you have the question, someone else does too. Very informal. Meet a couple more people from the Arts Endowment. Tell them we sent you. They'd love to hear from you. They'll be there anyway. It'll make them incredibly happy if you join them. And really stay in touch throughout this process up until you send that application. So that means getting in touch with one of us, getting in touch with the Senator's office, who I know would be glad to put us in touch, get in touch with our friends at South Arts. I'll just emphasize, stay in touch. There's no reason why you shouldn't ask the question that's on your mind. We want to make sure that you're in a position to succeed as you prepare your application. So the presentation will provide a general overview of the NEA, the grant programs we offer, and then we'll get into details about the upcoming opportunity made possible by the American Rescue Plan. And we do so because we want you to stay engaged beyond this particular grant making opportunity. We know that there's tremendous need in the field and we won't be able to serve everyone with this $135 million. So stay in touch and we'll go into some of the other opportunities beyond the American Rescue Plan. If we could go to the next slide, please, Ivan. So just a little bit on how we got here. So in addition to our regular grant programs, as I mentioned, as part of the American Rescue Plan, as the Senator so eloquently described, the National Endowment for the Arts will distribute roughly $135 million. And as you've already heard of that amount, 40% has already been allocated to state and regional arts organizations for regranting through their own programs. And we'll get into some of the finer points here, but generally speaking, would encourage you to check out the guidelines that you're with South Arts, with your state arts agency, and apply broadly. We will distribute the remaining 60% to arts organizations and local arts agencies, and that 60% is what we'll describe here today. Funding will be available for general operating support, and we'll get into the details of exactly what that means, and our guidelines are available on our website now. So if you haven't had the chance to take a look yet, would encourage you to do so as soon as possible. And we are making sure that this funding reaches a broad constituency across organizations that serve populations traditionally underserved by government, organizations with small and medium-sized budgets, organizations from rural to urban communities across the Southeast and the country, and organizations that may be applying for federal support through the Arts Endowment for the first time. And we recognize that if you're new to applying for federal funding, you might need that additional technical assistance work. And as I said before, we're eager to hear from you and look forward to working with you on your application. And we'll talk about the specifics about the ARP program and its support for operating costs again near the end of the presentation. Our regular annual grant programs provide project support, and we'll walk through the details on our annual programs as well. And just to make sure again that you're staying engaged with us throughout the year and beyond the ARP opportunity. And with that, I'll pass it over to my colleagues, Andy and Anya.
We're going to provide a brief overview of NEA funding opportunities before we specifically focus on the ARP grants. For those of you new to engaging with us, we want you to understand about all of the different types of support you might be eligible to request in addition to the ARP funding. Generally, our funding supports arts projects. When we get to the ARP section of this presentation, you'll see that for the ARP opportunity only, we're able to support operating costs, and that's reflected in the asterisk you see in the right-hand column on the screen. On the left-hand side of the screen, you'll see the types of organizations that are eligible to apply for funding. And eligibility is open to tax-exempt organizations, including 501c3 nonprofits, units of state or local government, including local arts agencies and educational institutions, and federally recognized tribal communities or tribes. On the right-hand side of the screen, you'll see examples of the things that we're not able to fund, and that includes general operating support, except for ARP support and certain waivers that I'll get to in a minute, individual artists, commercial activities, and fiscal sponsors. The full list of items that we do not fund is published in our guidelines, which are posted on our website, www.arts.gov. And I want to clarify that asterisk you see on general operating support. We do have new legislation related to allowing previously awarded project grants to be used for general operating support in response to COVID-19. If you have a previously funded award, you may be able to transition that into general operating support. However, currently all FY22 grant applications will continue to be for project-based applications. And then for the ARP support, the only allowable expenses will be operating expenses. There are certain requirements you must meet in order to be eligible to apply for an NEA grant. Can we go to the next slide, Ivan, please? You have to be a 501c3 nonprofit at the time of application. You must have a 3-year history of arts programming. You must be in compliance with any reporting requirements for a previous NEA award. And for our regular grant programs, you must provide a 1-to-1 cost share or match of non-federal funds. And the match can be achieved in a variety of ways, including earned income through ticket sales or in-kind donation of space. The match can also be a combination of these. And the ARP funds, though, are non-matching. There is no match required for these funds. Next slide, please. Our grant review process includes 3 levels of review. The first level of review is a citizen panel, which is made up of experts in the field, whether they are paid professionals or not. All of our panels are diverse in terms of geography, gender, ethnicity, and expertise. Panel recommendations are then submitted to the National Council on the Arts for their review and approval. And then the NEA chairman provides the final review and approval. If you're interested in being part of this process, we are always looking for new panelists, and we'll talk a bit more at the end about how to volunteer to serve. And one other comment about our process, panel feedback is always available to applicants. If you apply and are not recommended for a grant, we encourage you to reach out to your staff contact. It can be really helpful to hear what parts of your application resonated with panelists and what things they might have had questions or concerns on.
Next slide. These are the different funding categories offered by the NEA. Partnership agreements are only available to the designated state arts agencies and the 6 U.S. regional arts organizations, including South Arts, the host of this meeting. NEA has several funding opportunities for organizations. They include Challenge America, grants for arts projects, Our Town, and research grants. These are the largest grants we offer, and nonprofit organizations receive the bulk of our direct funding. Grants for individuals are limited to literature fellowships. In addition, we do have 2 honorific programs that offer recognition to jazz artists through the NEA's Jazz Masters program and folk and traditional artists through the National Heritage Fellowship program. Generally, you can submit one application per year per organization. However, there are some exceptions to the rule, so be sure to check the guidelines for clarity. Next slide. And here, by law, you can see 40% of NEA's grant funds are designated for the states and regions. The funding is awarded through partnership agreement grants to the 50 government arts agencies, the 6 territories, and the 6 regional arts organizations. Through partnership agreement support, the Arts Endowment makes the arts available in many more communities than it possibly could through our direct grant programs. The color coding on the map aligns with each state and its regional arts organization. As you can see, we've got South Arts and the 9 Southeastern state arts agencies represented in orange on your screen. Next slide. We mentioned that 3 of our primary funding programs for arts organizations are Challenge America, Grants for Arts Projects, and Our Town. Next, we'll focus on details about each program. Andy?
Thank you. Next slide, please. Challenge America primarily supports small organizations to extend the reach of the arts to populations that are underserved. All grantees must address how their organization or audience has been underserved, and this is defined by our legislation and agency policy, and refers to those whose opportunities to experience the arts are limited by geography, ethnicity, economics, or disability. All awards in Challenge America are $10,000 and require a 1-to-1 match. And Challenge America includes an abbreviated application process and robust technical assistance for applicants. And the deadline is typically in April of each year. Next slide, please. The Our Town program provides support for creative placemaking projects. So what do we mean by creative placemaking? The most simple definition is about strengthening local communities through arts and culture. And creative placemaking occurs when arts, culture, and design activities are deliberately integrated into efforts that strengthen communities. Next slide, please. Now let's look at the NEA's largest funding stream, grants for arts projects. Applications are submitted to one of 15 discipline programs at either the February or July deadline each year. Funding is available for all stages of the artistic process, and that can include creation, presentation, and exhibition, arts education and enrichment, as well as services to the field, such as conferences or professional development. All grants require at least a 1-to-1 match, and awards can range from $10,000 to $100,000, and the project timeline can be for up to 2 years. Next slide, please. We support projects in the Grants for Arts projects, which we call GAP, across 15 different disciplines, and you'll see those areas on the screen here. And guidelines for each discipline are posted on our website. To apply, you would choose the appropriate discipline based on the content of your project, not your organization, your project, and follow the guidelines and application instructions for that discipline. We encourage you to look through the discipline-specific guidelines and reach out to staff with any questions. Contact information for our full staff, including each artistic discipline, is available on our website. Anya?
Thanks, Andy. And now we're going to move on to American Rescue Plan Awards. Please note that we actually have 2 ARP grant programs, each with its own deadline and requirements. The July 22nd deadline is for local arts agencies that wish to run a sub-granting program. The August 12th deadline is for all other organizations seeking operational support, including local arts agencies that do not wish to run a sub-grant program. Each program has its own award amount and timeline, specific eligibility requirements, documentation, and reporting requirements. Next slide. As you can see on this slide, support is designated for very specific costs: salary support, fees and stipends for artists and contractual personnel, facilities costs associated with health and safety supplies, and marketing and promotional costs. Next slide. And these are a few of the most common questions we've been receiving. Yes, you may apply for ARP funds even if you've already applied for and received NEA CARES Act funds, any other NEA fund program, or other federal relief funds such as Shuttered Venue Operator Grant or the Paycheck Protection Program. Now back to Andy.
Thank you. Next slide, please, Ivan. Do get started now to register with sam.gov and grants.gov if you haven't already. The process can take some time and you need these registrations in place to submit an application to us. Late applications aren't accepted. And actually try to submit early so that if you run into any tech issues, we can work with you to clear them up well before the application deadline. Next slide, please. We have special ARP mailboxes where you can submit questions as you're going along and designated ARP telephone numbers too. Also, there are a wealth of technical assistance resources on our website. Next slide, please. So our application process is in two parts. I'm going to handle part one and Anya will handle part two. So whichever program, whichever discipline program you decide to apply for, and I'm back on grants to organizations in ARP, whether you are applying for the local arts agency subgrant program or the arts organization ARP program, no matter which one you apply to, the process is the same, and it's a two-part process. Part one is where you will work with two federal systems, the System for Award Management, which is sam.gov, and grants.gov. And you're going to need those up-to-date registrations I just spoke about and correct permissions through these systems to apply for funding. It can be pretty complex. And once you have the current accounts in both systems, the actual form you submit for part one is the SF 424 form, standard form 424. This form is actually pretty easy. It provides basic information about your organization and it shouldn't take too long to fill out. You aren't required to submit any specific details about your project at this point in the process. Think about this step as submitting your intent to apply. It's a way to express your interest in submitting the full application. Back to Anya.
Thanks, Sandy. So part two is the actual Arts Endowment grant application form. It's where you will submit the bulk of your application and all of the specifics about your project. You'll pull together your project narratives, the budget, and details on key personnel. And in other applications, work samples. For the rescue plan, there will be no work samples. The grant application form is submitted through our own Arts Endowment online platform, which is called the Applicant Portal. The guidelines for each of our funding programs, which are posted on our website at arts.gov, include step-by-step instructions on using the portal and how to apply. The instructions for part two include an application instructions document. This document goes through all the questions you'll need to answer for part two, including not just the questions themselves, but also helpful tips, screenshots of the portal, and the character count limit for each application field. So you can compile all of your application content ahead of time, and then you'll enter all that information into the NEA's applicant portal during the designated time frame. Next slide, please. And we would love to have you stay connected with us and the National Endowment for the Arts. We release regular newsletters that highlight upcoming grant program deadlines, as well as events and resources. It's a great way to keep up with what's going on with the Arts Endowment and field news from around the country. So please subscribe. You can go to our website at arts.gov, and at the bottom of the homepage, there's a button for newsletters. You can click there and sign up for any newsletter topics that most interest you. And next slide. One last reminder that we are always looking for new voices to bring to our panel process. It's a great way to connect with us and to really learn what the process is like from the other side. We've been told that it's a great professional development opportunity. If you're interested, you can fill out a form on our website at the URL listed below, or contact us directly. And now, next slide, we're going to move on to the question and answer session. Please submit your questions through the chat function.
Great. Thank you so much, Anya and Andy. We know that that was a lot of information and you all are probably gathering your thoughts. Want to make clear that we'll make sure that the slides are available for your reference. So hopefully that I think we're all, every time that I hear it, I learn a great deal, and we hope that you've done the same. As Anya said, would encourage everyone to put questions in the chat, as well as we have the Q&A function at the bottom of your screen as well. And Courtney was kind enough to answer some questions in real time. So if you want to check out some questions that she's already answered, please do so. I will just lift up, I think one question that we heard a few times in there was, I've applied to a state arts agency, a regional arts organization. There's another federal funding opportunity. May I also apply through the NEA too? Short answer, yes. And we would encourage you to apply broadly. We understand that there is, again, tremendous need in the field and we won't be able to fund every application, unfortunately. So apply to every opportunity that's available to you. Would encourage you to take a look at the guidelines with your state arts agency, as each one might be different. As Courtney mentioned in the chat, just make sure that you're not doubling up on literally the same dollar. So you could think about salary from January and salary from February, totally fine, just not paying for this same salary through two different sources. So just turning to the chat. We have a question from Daniel. Our 501c3 status is currently pending, but we do have a fiscal sponsor. Are we able to still submit through our fiscal sponsor while we wait for 501c3 approval? I see a sad look from Anya of shaking her head no, but I will turn over to Anya to answer.
Thank you. Sorry, at the time of the deadline, if you do not have your 501c3 in place, you just have to wait it out until you have it.
And we would encourage that my understanding is that while we can't fund fiscal sponsors, the fiscal sponsor itself could apply. Is that accurate, my colleagues?
Yes, for their own programming, but they
Their
couldn't
own
apply on
programming.
behalf of another organization.
And again, Daniel, we know that this isn't the news that you were hoping for, so we just encourage you to stay in touch with us, with folks at South Arts, with your state arts agency, and there'll be other funding opportunities. And again, we're sorry that we're unable to make this opportunity available to you right now, but hope you'll stay in touch with us. A question from Ellen. I'm working with a group in Mississippi that's building a park at a site of a former school for Black children during segregation. They have a 501c3 and some matching funds. They would like an artist mural. Should we try to go through our local arts council or apply for some of these funds? They don't have 3 years of arts activities. So as you heard, our funding does require 3 years of programmatic history, but again, would encourage you to take a look at, again, all funding opportunities and make sure that you might be eligible for other grant opportunities. But I'll ask Andy or Anya or Courtney or Eleanor, really our brain trust here, if you have additional thoughts. Hearing none, move to the next question. Thank you.
There was a question around the reporting requirements for the ARP.
Yes,
I've
heard
reporting requirements.
My colleagues described this eloquently previously, so I will turn it over to them. Courtney, do you have thoughts there?
Yes, I'm happy to answer that, but I also wanted to ask if people have questions that are grant application related, if they can put them in the Q&A instead of the chat, so we're not trying to look at both for questions. That might be helpful.
Sure.
And we'll continue to answer through the chat as well, if that's okay, since we're now getting quite a few, and I'm not sure we'll be able to answer all verbally.
Yes,
Is that
would
all
be-
right? Okay.
That sounds like a great idea.
Great.
And we'll do our best. And again, if we don't get to your question here today, please stay in touch and we'll be sure to address it over email or the phone. Anya,
Yeah.
on the registration requirements?
The reporting requirements.
Reporting requirements, sorry.
Right. All grantees must submit final reports. Now, it used to be 90 days after the period of performance ended, and now it's 120 days for current and future grantees. There is a final descriptive report, a financial status report, as well as some other reporting that needs to happen. And our Office of Grants Management will stay with you and help answer any questions and make sure that you comply. If you have outstanding final reports, that could affect your ability to get future funding. So you do want to, it's federal funding, and we have federal regulations that require this kind of reporting.
Thank you, Anya. Question that we hear frequently, and I'm glad was asked so we could address it. Can you describe how an applicant determines whether they should be asking for one of the three funding levels? And again, that's $50,000, $100,000, or $150,000. And we know this is on everyone's mind, and we don't have a perfect answer that's a one size fits all, because you all are not one size fits all, right? So I think what we want to begin with emphasizing is that no part of this application is meant to be a gotcha question. We're not looking to trip you up and you have something in the back of your mind that says, I'm going to ask for too much and they're going to think I'm greedy. None of that. That these funding levels are intended with an eye towards flexibility. As you may know, with the CARES funding opportunity, that was a flat grant for $50,000. And what we're doing this time around, again, is doing those additional funding levels because we know you all are not one size fits all. So that was really the way we're approaching it. And we want you to take a look at our guidelines and see what might be right for you based on your budget and based on really your need. Again, we understand that there's tremendous need right now and there's a great deal of uncertainty with your budget. And so we want to hear from you. So get in touch if you do have specific questions, follow up, drop into one of those Q&A and make sure that you're connected with the right discipline specific director or specialist. And Anya or Andy, any additional thoughts on that question?
I think you stated it as best I've ever heard it stated.
And
Andy,
just
go ahead,
a
Anya,
tip.
please.
Sure. Just a tip, your total project cost should equal the amount that you are requesting from the NEA. So if you're requesting $50,000, then your total project cost must equal $50,000. It's the only opportunity where you don't have to show a match, but you make sure that your total project costs end up $50,000 on the nose. So do percentages of your salaries or percentages of your facilities for the year, or however many months the period of performance is for, and pull out that calculator and make sure it equals 50,000 or 100,000 or 150.
Great.
And then the only thing that I might consider adding is that our two review criteria are artistic excellence and artistic merit. And that latter one would pertain to issues around your capacity and stewardship and responsibility of managing those federal funds. So that also may play into the amount you choose to request. You need to be able to talk about the systems you have in place to manage those funds.
If I can also just add a note, and this is also responding to a question that's in the chat around whether an org that's an all volunteer organization is eligible or whether they have to have full-time staff to apply. You're absolutely eligible. You don't have to have full-time staff, and your org budget may be a little smaller if much of what you're doing is volunteer driven, and that's all great. What you need to do is make sure that your costs reflect what you say you want to do with the funds in your narrative and reflect what your mission statement for your organization says that you do in the community. So if your work is volunteer led, but you hire a lot of artists to do education in the community, and your budget shows costs to support paying artists to do education in the community, that's great. Those are eligible costs. That's totally fine. You don't need staff costs. You also don't have to have facility or utility costs. It's really about what your particular needs are within this range of core costs to keep your organization running that we want to support. So hopefully that helps a little bit, but we definitely welcome organizations of all different sizes. You just want to make sure that your costs, the amount you request responds to what the costs are that you're indicating a need for, and that you have some evidence of the work you're doing relating to the amounts, and also the amount of time you're asking for, whether that's 6 months or a year or 2 years. If you're asking for 6 months, you probably don't want to ask for 150,000 if your budget's normally 50,000. So just, kind of using that logic too, that time frame can be an important consideration too.
Great, thank you so much for all that clarification. Question that we have in the Q&A, will certain types of organizations be given priority? What will the evaluation process be? So I think what's important to emphasize is by statute, so that's in our authorizing language that Congress allows us to continue to operate as an agency, provides 2 criteria of artistic merit and excellence. But when we talk about different types of organizations, that's why we're here with you today. And that's why we're so glad that South Arts has agreed to host us, because we want to engage with the small organizations among you, with those who've never applied for federal funding before, with those who are in areas of the country traditionally served by government, or and those led by people of color, indigenous creative communities. But again, we have certain criteria for review, but we want to engage with everyone and make sure everyone is on an even playing field when you choose to apply. Andy or Anya, do you want to give a little more description about the review process itself?
Sure. So reviewers will be reading each application and judging it against the 2 review criteria of artistic excellence and artistic merit. Applications are not compared to each other. They are reviewed on their own standing. So just remember, if you are a small organization, let's say a $40,000 a year operation, and 50,000 is the most you can, the least amount you can ask for, you can make your period of performance 2 years, and that way you can spread that 50,000 over a 2-year period. The other thing that was kind of interesting to read in some of these questions is, and I'll try to address it from an old friend, Olga, about the workspace that you encounter at grants.gov. This has been going on now for about 3 years. So I know sometimes it looks very new. This is a way grants.gov has managed to open up your account so you can have more than one person working in your account at the same time preparing an application. Remember, grants.gov is a federal-wide site, and some people use it to apply to NIH or Department of Defense, and they attach documents to that SF-424. For the Arts Endowment, it's much simpler. You just have one little form that you have to submit, and you don't have to attach any PDFs. Unfortunately, we have no control over what happens at grants.gov. So they do have a webinar, and they have a wonderful, wonderful support staff. They have an 800 number. I think we've posted it. It's on our website. Just please reach out to them, and they'll explain anything you don't understand.
Great. Thank you, Anya, for catching that question and giving such a great answer as well. A general question that maybe we could go around the room with my NEA colleagues. What would you say is the biggest mistake that you see in applications that would make an application get passed over? So we have a lot of institutional knowledge here in the virtual Zoom room. I don't know if there's anything that comes to mind from my colleagues, but if you'd like to chime in with any common mistakes.
That's a big question, Ben. I mean, I think certainly making sure you're asking for, I mean, in terms of things that will get you disqualified and not even reviewed, you have to make sure you ask for at least $50,000. And that the costs you submit for $50,000 are eligible costs. And that's very specific to this opportunity, but that applies across our opportunities. You need to make sure you're very clear on what's eligible and that your costs are at least the minimum and are eligible costs. So that's just baseline requirement, making sure you submit that information. Yeah, I'll stop there. I don't know if Anya has, or Andy, or
I'll add something. I think it's really, really important to tell your story and tell it well. This funding, the ARP funding, is very different from our normal project grant funding, where you can talk about the artists you're going to be bringing in and what kind of project you'll be doing. Here, you're talking about salary support. Maybe you're talking about rent or mortgage payments or the gas bill. And so you need to tell a compelling story still to the panelists so that they understand what the impact of this funding is going to be for your organization and your constituents and the community that you are serving. Help them understand that you understand your community and that you're engaged with them and that you know how this will make an impact.
Thank you so much, Andy and Courtney. A question, we have artists traveling over 2 hours a day to work in rural schools. Can the funds be used to pay for housing? You have my colleagues ready to jump in on that question. Courtney?
I thought the question was going to be travel. Yes, you can pay for travel. Paying for housing, I would think if it's basically the equivalent of paying for a visiting artist to have housing, then that should be eligible. I don't know, Anya?
Travel and subsistence is kind of iffy. If it's fee support, then I think it's fine. But that's one of those questions that I think we need to check back with the grants office. Because I've seen some of the travel costs in previous general operating support waivers being questioned. So if you don't need to throw in the travel, put something else in there.
Yes, no, and with all of this, please, if we haven't answered your question as specifically as necessary, please stay in touch with any of us or get in touch with a discipline-specific colleague of ours, and we'll be more than happy to follow up with you. I know again that Courtney and Eleanor are doing their very best in answering questions in the chat in real time. If you feel like your question has not been answered, again, please stay in touch. And we appreciate your patience as we try and get through as many of these as possible in the time allotted. And thank you for your continued patience as we work through these. A question in the Q&A, if a museum is applying for funding through ARP for general operating support, do we still have to have 3 years of arts programming? Does a history exhibit qualify as arts programming?
Yes.
Perfect.
So to be eligible to apply to any NEA grant, including the rescue plan, you have to have 3 years of artistic programming.
Great, thank you, Anya. I will try and get more questions to you where the answer is just yes, good news, you should apply, as opposed to we won't just have you be Dr. No throughout the entire time.
I have one more quick yes one out there. A question about whether the ARP funding is a reimbursement, I suppose, as opposed to just a check you get or a direct deposit. Yes, it's similar to it's the same as our other grants in that you have to request a reimbursement or up to 30 days in advance of an expense. So same as our normal grants, you can request a reimbursement for incurred expenses from the start date, January 1 forward, January 1, 22 forward, or reimbursement for I'm sorry, advances up to 30 days in advance.
Great. Thank you, Courtney, for continuing to work these, and Eleanor as well. A question about that first step, the grants.gov and the sam.gov. We want to make sure everyone is well situated with before the August 12th deadline. To apply, does the nonprofit need to apply through both grants.gov and sam.gov websites, or just choose one to do the first process of showing intention to apply? We have a DUNS number, but we have never used sam.gov and want to ensure we do this correctly. My step one colleagues.
So sam.gov, you have to register in both sam.gov and grants.gov. Think of grants.gov as the front door to the federal government's grant making processes. So you will submit your application form, that SF 424 form, through grants.gov that says, hey, federal government, I'm here. I would like some ARP funding. The next step of the process is what you do through the workspace. And that is where you talk about your project and you provide the narrative and you upload your budget. So that's the part that goes directly to the NEA. It bypasses grants.gov. They will have shipped over to us electronically the SF 424 that you submitted. It will meet up with the other stuff that you have submitted to us, and you will have one complete application residing at the NEA.
Perfect. A question, if we are an organization that began over 3 years ago, so that's referencing the 3 years of programmatic history, but we became a nonprofit less than 3 years ago, are we still eligible? My understanding is that that's a quick yes, but
Yes.
Perfect. Anya is now just here to say yes to everyone. Perfect. Thank you, Anya and Andy.
Can I lift up a question from the chat?
Please. Thank you, Courtney.
There's a question about what are the key differences between what is allowed under an ARP grant versus the NEA's ongoing grants. ARP is very specifically, and we can send a link for this as well, but ARP is very specifically focused on operating costs. So specifically that's salary support, full or partial, for one or more staff positions, fees and stipends for artists and or contractual personnel. That could be your accountant, that could be an artist, a lot of different kinds of contractors you might have. Artist fees or stipends should be related to tangible outcomes such as performances, presentations, workshops, or the creation of artwork. Facility costs such as mortgage principal, but not mortgage interest, rent or utilities, costs associated with health and safety supplies such as PPE, and marketing promotion costs. Those are very specific for ARP. You can see that list again on our website in the on the program description, and I'll post that here. Our other grant opportunities are all specifically tied to specific arts programmatic activities. So a project or a program that your organization is going to be putting on. It might include staff salaries or artist fees or facility costs, but those costs all have to be tied to a specific project or program or activity. So if you're going to do a performance and 10% of your time and energy and costs are associated with that, then the amounts in those budgets should only be 10%. I'll stop there because others might want to add to that, or in any case, this link I just posted here for program description has the list of what's eligible for this particular opportunity.
Thank you, Courtney. Anything to add, my NEA colleagues? I think Courtney covered it well there. Thank you. So the big question that we want to make sure that we're answering, is the grant process open yet? Yes, absolutely. Encourage you, check out our guidelines. Links I think have been put in the chat. Get started as soon as possible and stay in touch. Emphasize that over and over again. This is an open application process. We want to emphasize though, take your time. This is not a first come, first serve at any point in the process, but we do want to make sure that you have the time you need in order to submit your application. Can the funding be used to fund a program that has been in existence for a while? The ARP grant sounds ideal to continue this project. again, I want to emphasize that ARP is for general operating support. So I think the short answer is yes, but with the caveat that ARP funds are for general operating support. Anything to add, Anya, Andy, Courtney?
So instead of being able to fund a program or a project, the ARP funding could perhaps support the salary of a staff person there who normally would run the project. So you're not paying perhaps for transportation related to the project or rental costs for a school bus or something like that, but you're paying for the staff, the ongoing salary of a staff person who perhaps had responsibility for that project or program. So this is what is helping you keep your organization alive. You know, our regular grant programs will help you support individual projects. The ARP support is for your organization to help it recover from COVID.
Great, thank you so much, Andy. Just moving on to, again, and encourage you to follow along with us in the Q&A. Courtney and Eleanor are doing their best to answer questions, and we'll continue to read them aloud just for the benefit of the entire group. A question that kind of gets into that, how much should I apply for? How do I work through this process? Can you do a percentage of your overall budget rather than a bunch of smaller, more specific percentages?
I think you have to break it down. So you can submit a single line item, $50,000 for your executive director. And that's it. That can be the only line item in the budget, which feels a little strange and too easy, but that can be what you submit. Or you can do a whole bunch of other costs, but you have to break them down. You can't just say operating costs.
Great, thank you, Courtney. Again, question along those lines, and we know that this is front of mind for you all, and our apologies that we don't have really a magic bullet to hit everyone all at once and give you a perfect answer that makes sense for everyone. But the question is, if you apply for $100,000 or $150,000 and the review process determines a lower grant amount would be a better fit, would you adjust the award amounts or simply deny the grant? So we are only eligible to fund at the level for which you apply. And that's why, again, it's so important for you to review the guidelines, see what makes sense for your budget, see what makes sense for your operating costs at this time, and stay in touch with us. And we understand that will cause some anxiety because you're wanting to choose the right amount, but we want to make sure that you have the opportunity to do so and you're picking what's right for your organization at this unique time that we're all faced with today. With the Shuttered Venue Operator Grant we mentioned earlier, organizations were required to have paid personnel to apply. Is this a requirement of ARP?
No, you do not have to have paid personnel. You can be an all-volunteer organization.
Perfect, thank you, Andy.
And I see another question related. So if a salary is $48,000, but the lowest ARP grant is $50,000, should we not submit an application? No, because you can do a 2-year grant period and split that salary up to 24 for the first year, 24 for the second year, or something similar to that.
But the total must be at least 50. The total amount you request has to be at least 50.
Yeah. And you could add an additional expense, add a facility expense in there, add some rent or mortgage, add another salary.
I have a question about a technical problem that someone is having. It seems as though perhaps with the sam.gov or grants.gov website, we have a page, and we can put it in the chat, of some tips and tricks about navigating that process. But as my colleagues mentioned, this is something that's used across the federal government. So unfortunately, we don't own that website, and there are colleagues of ours who manage those processes and are experts on those. So we would kindly direct you to them, but perhaps if you check out that page, it might help with that process, but be sure to stay in touch. We certainly don't want you to hit a roadblock so you're unable to apply because of something so small like a technical problem on a website.
Yeah, definitely call us or send an email. But I will also say, if you go on our website, and we can post a link for this, or I don't think we want to take the time to actually do a screen share, but if you go to the how to apply section on our website, that is where you can access the materials. So on how to apply, there's a whole series of, this is under the ARP opportunity. There's a whole series of plus marks that if you click on those, they expand content. And for part 1, it will literally walk you through every single step from registering with sam.gov and arts.gov, grants.gov, to a link to the grants.gov form, which is a great way to access that form and start your workspace for the grants.gov piece. And then, the next step within that is literally how do you answer each question? We give you advice on how to do that. So please use that section, how to apply. For part 2, there's a PDF that you can open up that will show you every single question, along with character counts. You really can plan ahead. So just make sure you do look at that closely, because we've tried to give you as much information as possible.
Great, thank you so much, Courtney. The question, again, I think, goes into how do I choose what's best for my organization? Is there a guideline for requesting funds for 1 year versus 2 years? Or are we encouraged to include funds needed for 2 years if rebuilding our staff and service reach will take longer than 1 year? Anya, do you have thoughts there?
The time frame is really what's best for you. So we do allow up to 2 years. You'll find that's also in our guidelines for other grant programs. So if that's what it takes, go ahead and put in the 2 years. Remember, the earliest start date is January 1st, 2022, and it can go through December 31st, 2023. You don't have, if your project, but period of, well, it's not a project. So the period of performance, if you want to start it, let's say April 1st, 2022, that's fine. Some people might come in for just 5 months or 6 months, and some may come in for a full 2-year period.
Can I offer answer a question and maybe help clarify around deadlines?
Please.
If it's okay, I'm going to share my screen, because I made a slide for a different presentation that I think, let's see, sorry, might be helpful. Can you guys see that slide with the arrow on it?
Yes.
Okay, so basically there's 2 parts to the deadline. Part 1 is August. This is specific to the grants for organizations, not the local arts agencies opportunity. But part 1 is due August 12th at midnight. That's for everyone. Anybody applying to grants for organizations, deadline is midnight Eastern time on August 12th. Part 2 is due in 2 cycles. Groups A through L have a week-long window to submit part 2 between August 19th through 25th. So if your organization's name starts with A through L, you'd be in that first group. If your org name is M through Z, then August 27th through September 2nd is your deadline. And again, it's a week-long window that you can submit. And you can resubmit if you need to edit your application. Once you've submitted once, you can totally do that. But that window's open for a week for each of those 2 times. From then, we'll go dark for a little bit. We're going to go through a panel review process this fall. We're going to go through a council review process in end of November and into December. And then you'll hear from us one way or another in December about whether you're being recommended for an award. You would have an opportunity to edit your budget at that point in case your situation has changed if you are recommended. And then your funding would be available as early as January 1, 2022. And your costs could start from January 1, 2022. So hopefully that's helpful.
Very helpful. Thank you, Courtney.
Yep.
We were getting questions in the chat about that exact thing. So thank you so much for doing that. Just going back to try and work through some of these questions, and thank you for continuing to stay with us and stay engaged and ask your questions. We have been using a state grant to pay for 5 of our volunteers, all of whom have disabilities. all of whom have disabilities part-time, can this grant be used to hike their pay to full-time? Is that a legitimate way to interpret salary health? A specific question. I don't know if any of my colleagues have a direct answer there, or we can follow up. Or so the thought of
I think that would be fine, but where you have to get very, very careful with your bookkeeping is having two different grants paying for the same expenses. So it may be easier to have one grant pay for one or two of your employees and the other grant pay for the other employees rather than putting both grants into the same employee.
Yeah, great advice, Andy. Thank you. A question, we are a small organization with only 6 staff members. So in addition to day-to-day, members are heading specific programs as well. We all wear a lot of hats. Aside from hours devoted to development and fundraising, is there any sort of staff hours that are not allowable? Andy or Anya or Courtney, you look like you're ready.
Well, I don't, correct me if I'm wrong, folks, but I think that development and fundraising costs are allowable. So I don't think those are excluded. There are no particular staff positions that would be excluded from what I understand.
Right. As long as the development staffing is for managing this award. So even in the grants for arts projects, the project support, you can also have some development personnel in it, but it has to be devoted strictly to managing that award. So it cannot be 100% of their annual salary.
Thank you.
Thank you both. And I know that, one thing to keep in mind, that marketing and promotion is part of general operating support. We understand as you're reopening your doors, that could be one of the most important things as you welcome people back in to your theater, your space, whatever it might be. So would encourage you to keep that in mind as well. My organization is adding an additional building. I understand that construction is not covered, but what about costs like a surveyor, architect, engineer? Courtney, this feels right up your alley.
Yeah, basically, we can pay for design services, but I don't think that would fall into this opportunity. I think if you were paying the mortgage for this new building, we could pay for that. But I feel like, I don't know, you guys weigh in if you think differently, but I feel like and generally we cannot pay for construction. We can pay for design, we can pay for fees associated with design, including engineering, but we cannot pay for the construction of anything other than a piece of art. And in this case, that would also not be eligible here. But I don't think this grant opportunity is appropriate for those kinds of costs.
I'm on the fence about this one, Courtney, as well. And I think this is one we may have to get back to the questioner after we talk with our grants office about it.
If you want to, if you want to send us an email directly to the ARP emails, and I'll post those again, we can send us an email at that address and we can give you a more clear and final response there.
Thank you so much. And again, that's the same. If you feel like we didn't answer your question accurately, please stay in touch through the various different communication streams that we're offering. Email us, drop into the live Q&A chat. We look forward to continuing to hear from you. Another question we have, are arts and other organizations partnering to create the project allowed to apply as a team with the qualifying organization leading the application? And do the other organizations also need all the federal registrations, sam.gov, grants.gov? Anya, do you have Anya or Andy?
Yeah, I'll take this. This sounds a bit of like the old consortium applications that went away back in 2012. Each application, each organization should really come for the rescue plan should come on its own. We're not bundling people together, so it should be that one organization should come on its own, and the others should also come on their own. If they're all eligible, then we should.
Great, thank you. Anything to add? Courtney or Andy capture it?
I wasn't sure if the questioner was asking about the ARP program or perhaps something like our Town program, where we do look for partnerships between organizations. And in that case, Courtney can respond if I've got this wrong, but certainly the lead applicant has to have all of the sam.gov and grants.gov registrations, but I don't think that the partner organizations do.
I would say yes. I mean, I agree with you. We had somebody ask if all the links can be captured. Joy, could you let us know, or Susie, will we be, or any from South Arts, will we be able to share this chat thread, maybe not the Q&A, but at least the chat afterwards?
I believe Ivan can download that chat and we can keep that information available for you for sure.
Okay, great.
Yes, all links will be posted and made available on southarts.org, along with the recording of this webinar and the slides within 48 hours. Thank you.
And not only is he going to do it, but he's going to set a deadline for himself. That's impressive. Thank you, Ivan. Thank you, Joy. Really important question. We lost a staff position in 2016 due to budget concerns and are now down to 2 full-time staff. Can ARP be used to restore a lost staff position or just for existing staff salaries? Andy, you look poised to jump in there.
Yes, to both. Yes, you can restore a position, you can add a position, you can bump up a position to more hours. You've got total flexibility.
And thank you, Andy, for the enthusiastic response. And I think that it came with enthusiasm because that's why we're so excited about this funding opportunity and what general operating support and really what the American Rescue Plan can mean for the arts field. That it means coming out on the other side of the pandemic. And that means, hiring people, bumping up salaries, doing what you need to reopen your doors. So thank you so much, Andy, and for the question as well. Approximately how many grants do you plan on awarding? For comparison purposes, how many did you give out in 2020 for the COVID relief funds? I feel like this is a colleague of ours testing us for the materials that we went over. Does anyone have that number quickly handy?
I think we made, as a guess, I think we made about 800 CARES Act grants, but they were all $50,000 straight. That was the only amount available. We are planning to make similar number of awards in the grants for organizations category. Again, about 800 grants, but they'll be at a varying range of amounts. The next question will be, do you know how many in each category? And we don't have a rubric or a plan or an answer for that. We're going to see what comes in and fly the plane as we build it. There's also separately we're expecting to make about 80 awards in the locals subgranting opportunity.
Great, thank you so much, Courtney. Andy, Rania, anything to add? Perfect, thank you so much. A good question about avoiding double dipping and making sure that you're able to apply for other funding opportunities. If we get general operating support for salaries from our local and state arts commissions, do we just deduct the amount from the funding amount we would request for grants for salaries from the NEA? So Courtney, you look ready to.
Sure. I think if you have a salary, say it's $100,000 salary, I'm just going to make up because that's easy to divide, and you get a certain amount, say you get 30,000 from your local and 30,000 from your state, you can ask us for the additional 40,000. You just want to make, you just want to make sure that you're not getting funds that are federally generated for more than 100% of someone's salary. Or, I guess we wouldn't know if you've double dipped across like a random grant, but if you're asking for federal funds, and there's a question here about whether you can also apply to our town in addition to ARP, the answer is yes. You just want to make sure any staff time in your our town application doesn't overlap with staff time in your ARP. Like if you've got one person who's going to do both of those things, you want to make sure that either the dates or the amounts don't overlap or don't total to more than 100.
Andy, do you have additional thoughts there?
No, I think Courtney covered it. You just need to make sure that the different grants are paying for different time periods.
Great. A general question that might benefit the group. Given the restrictions on what can be funded, do we have tips on how we might best make a compelling narrative? Just trying to wrap my head around how we might make something turn from the mundane to compelling. Andy, I think you said it quite eloquently earlier. If I could ask you just to repeat about contributions to community, that would be wonderful.
Sure. What I've been saying in-house to my colleagues is, sometimes it's hard to write about the artistry of the gas bill. And so what's important for the panelists is that they understand the work that your organization is doing, what its impact is in the community, that you actually understand that impact and you're able to convey it to the panelists. And you can talk about the difference that salary support will make. What will it mean to you to have this person on board in terms of what kind of work your organization is able to do and to carry out? And what kind of a difference will it make for your constituents? You've got to be able to tell that compelling story. So it isn't the gas bill, but it's what the gas bill will allow you to do.
Beautiful. Thank you, Andy. A quick question that just came over the chat that's important to emphasize. If you receive the second round of PPP, can you request payroll assistance through ARP NEA funds as long as it's a different time frame from the PPP funding? Resounding yes. I don't know if any of, but I see all nodding heads. That's always a good sign, and I like that. So yes, absolutely. And encourage you, if you did apply PPP, Shuttered venue, another federal grant program, state arts agency, regional arts organization, apply broadly, make sure that you are casting your net widely and you have every opportunity to succeed and get the money you need. Are community foundations eligible to apply? Our organization focuses heavily on arts exposure in our community, specifically rural and underserved areas, but that is not our only focus.
As long as you are a nonprofit 501c3 and you've got a 3-year history of arts programming as defined in our guidelines, and you've got an up-to-date grants.gov and sam.gov registration, et cetera, and a DUNS number, then you are eligible to apply.
Wonderful. A good question that I haven't seen before, and I'm hoping I know the answer to, but let's just make sure. Our organization name starts with a the. Are we in A through L or M through Z? I'm hoping that we don't put the under T, because that would just be poor form on our part, but I'm going to turn it over if one of my colleagues knows that specifically.
Oh, thank you for that question. If your federal name begins with a the, THE, then you are in the T's, M through Z. If you are a popular the orchestra, but your federal name is, oh, no, that's wrong. Oh, let's say the Albany Symphony versus Albany Symphony, comma, the, you really belong in A through L. So look at your federal name.
Perfect. See, the best thing about my getting to do these with great organizations like South Arts or my colleagues is I learn something every single time. So thank you, Anya. I'm sure I would have gotten that wrong. If we apply as an individual arts organization and then during the funded year, we get absorbed by another organization. This is one of Andy and my favorite questions involving mergers. Do we need to return the funds? And so I think what's happening here is a small organization is awarded a grant and then they become part of a larger organization before the money is spent as applied for.
I think this is one where we would have to have a conversation with our grants office to make sure that the purpose of the original award is still able to be carried out and the same cost expenses are still able to be covered. If those are changing, then we'd probably have to have a conversation.
Great. Thank you, Andy. I feel like these are such good, this is like final exam of National Endowment for the Arts, and you're coming up with lots of tricky, good questions. And I'm just so grateful that my colleagues are here and I'm not trying to do these on my own.
We only have 3 more now sitting in the chat. We're down to the last few.
would vehicle maintenance, gas, insurance, etc., be covered by ARP?
So whoever submitted this question, thanks for your patience. I didn't know the answer to this, and I submitted a request to this is the first question we got. I submitted it to the help desk and no one has responded yet. So do you know, Eleanor, or do we need to check with the grants office?
We need to check with the grants office on this
Okay.
one. It's a
That's-
really good question to submit to them. So thank you for whoever sent that along, and we will follow up with you. So if we don't have the answer in real time, Courtney submitted it. Thank you, Courtney. If we can't follow up right now, then please send an email to that general ARP account that we posted in the chat, and we can send it out again, and we will get back to you. So we will follow up. Thank you.
Wonderful. Thank you both, Courtney and Eleanor, for working through these in real time. That's phenomenal that you were interacting with other colleagues of ours as we were going. A couple more questions. And again, we encourage you, I think we're here until 4:30 and we're here until August 12th and beyond. So stay in touch. And if you haven't thought of your question yet and you think of it as you're applying, but what about operational costs such as website platform and fundraising or volunteer management platforms? We cut back on operation costs in 2020, including rent. So we have very little of those, but we still have what's mentioned. So more of the online platforms. I'm assuming the answer is yes, but I don't know if my colleagues have.
Yes, it is.
Perfect.
It's a yes.
Does the NEA require any threshold of diversity, inclusion, representation in the board membership of grant applications? That's a great question, and thank you to whomever asked the question. There's no set threshold of diversity, inclusion, representation, but I think what's important for us as an agency, again, is making sure that we approach this ARP opportunity with an eye towards equity and inclusion, and that really means staying in touch with you all. As we discussed by statute, we have those two guiding principles of artistic merit and artistic excellence, but we're grateful to you for thinking of those things. It's certainly front of mind for us as well.
And helpful to share in your application if that's relevant in your narrative for the work that you're doing.
Of course. Thank you, Courtney, for adding that. Right. I think to the extent, as Andy described, if this is part of your work, the narrative of how you serve your community, always important to make sure that you include all relevant information so the panelists have a clear understanding of who you are and who you serve. A question that just came in, is this a reimbursement grant or an upfront payment grant in percentage or in full? Did that just get answered, perhaps, maybe?
Courtney answered it. It's all of our grants, but the ARP payments are made the same way as our regular grants. You can get in advance as long as you're going to spend it in 30 days. Or you can request a reimbursement. We do not send checks. You will not get a lump sum payment unless you got a grant for $50,000 and it's going to be spent within 30 days. Maybe you came in for a 1-month project that costs $50,000. If your budget is for $50,000, then yes, you can get $50,000 for that month.
Perfect. Thank you, Courtney, for answering that, and Anya for following up. So it looks like my colleagues have managed, we've gotten through 95 questions in the Q&A, and I know others in the chat. We're just so encouraged by your engagement throughout this process. 90 minutes together. Here's another question. Can we apply for a project grant and an ARP grant? Yes, absolutely.
We hope you will.
When we do that in unison.
Yes. Just make sure your costs don't overlap between the two grants.
Yes.
Because if you don't check that, we will. And we'd rather you check it.
Yes. Good rule of thumb. Thank you. Thank you, Courtney. So I'll pause there. Again, encourage everyone to check out our live Q&A. I know that link has gone out, and when Ivan shares all the links, we'll emphasize that one again. But it really is a casual opportunity to meet a couple more of our colleagues in a setting just like this one and ask some more specific questions or just listen in and learn from the questions that are going on around the country. I think maybe we'll pause there with tremendous thanks to my colleagues who've kept track of all these questions over the course of the last hour or so. Susie, Joy, or Ivan, may I turn it over to you for some closing remarks?
Well, let me just say, this was a marathon of answering questions and getting information out to the field, but so important for the field. We just thank all of you for taking time to learn more. We are so grateful to our partners at the National Endowment for the Arts for taking the time to ensure that all of you in our South Arts region and probably beyond have had an opportunity to learn more about this grants process. Please do go to the National Endowment for the Arts website. Would you guys share that one more time?
www.arts.gov.
It doesn't get any simpler than that, does it? And resources will be shared. The slide deck will be shared. So stay tuned. As you've registered, we'll send information back out. And we, again, thank you so very much for your time today. Ben, Andy, any closing remarks?
Well, I think just a big thank you to you, Joy, Ivan, and of course, Susie. I'll say it again that the region could not possibly be better served. And we're so thankful to you as a partner, looking forward to being in your theaters, your music venues, your museums when it's safe to do so. And again, just heartfelt thank you to Susie, Joy, and Ivan, and to all of you for sticking with us. I know that this is a lot of information. We want to continue to work with you, make sure you have those technical assistance resources you need. So just please stay in touch, and we look forward to hearing from you and receiving your application. Great. Thank you all.
With that, we say thank you and good evening.
Thanks, everybody.
Bye.